How's that even go? I haven't played that in forever. Anyway, that's a fun amp. The entire point of the amp is that you don't change channels. You just roll back your volume, and there it is. It has more white noise than I would like on the... it started as a Cherrytone, then had someone change out the transformers, etc., etc. So it's not quite the Cherrytone, but it has a Cherrytone ground scheme. Just a second, I'm gonna move the guitar cable out from beneath my chair, and it's a bit noisier than if I were to build it from scratch. And I don't want to rebuild all that stuff and have badly glued on Trainwreck gets the credit. If someone wants me to build a Trainwreck, I'll build a Trainwreck myself. I do it myself. I'm not really a Metallica fan past Justice. I thought the Bob Rock Black Album stuff and all the Therapy albums kind of like Aerosmith. You could hear it turning into a corporation. But I liked Injustice and even some of the Ride Lightning and Masters of Puppets stuff. Though the One era stuff was the stuff that I really liked a lot. I used to like Queensryche too. I listened to a lot of different music, and I used to know how to play that. Though at the time, say '88, my jam was Living Color. Anything Vernon Reid did, I did half as fast and half as well, but I was trying it. So I loved all that stuff, man. I was listening. Nikki's 4 years younger than me, and now in 2026, that's nothing. But back in 84 through 90, that was a huge, huge age gap in terms of the things we were aware of. So she was saying that she liked punk, and I said, what punk bands do you like? And I'm like, listen to her name off all this pop punk stuff. I'm like, all right, let's do a deep dive. So I took her from everything from early Kinks to the MC5, screw the Ramones. Here is the Clash. At the time, the only band that mattered. Hey, I mean, here's the Stranglers, everything all the way up through Fishbone and Eye Against Eye, Bad Brains. You know, and that was my world. All that stuff. Husker Du, love Husker Du. I should have played some Husker Du. You know, so I enjoyed all that stuff the same way I enjoy a lot of music. To me, Sonny Rollins is punk in attitude, just has a much bigger vocabulary. You know, I really respected Metallica for the same reasons I really respected Husker Du and I really respected REM before they were all famous. So, you know, Husker Du never got famous. They were out there traveling across North America in Ford Econoline vans, living on a jar of peanut butter to make their music. And whether you view REM as more artistically valid than Metallica or vice versa, they were both, you know, they were walking the walk, and I respected that, and you could hear it in their music at the time. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the Chili Peppers. They're also very formulaic, yabba dabba doo. I liked Mother's Milk, but mostly just because of Flea on that album. And the drummer, Chad, is a monster, but it's not a very interesting band to me. Zen Arcade, yeah. I liked every Husker Du album, but what I really liked about them is they all sounded like they could have been done on the little Tascam 4-track like I had, which is good and bad. Certainly the Pixies and Nirvana owed them a huge debt, which I'm fairly confident Kurt Cobain acknowledged all the time. Anyway, enough about me and how old I am and how good my musical taste is. even if I don't remember how to play some of that stuff. But let's get to the questions. For those of you new to the chat, thank you for joining me. We try to do this every Saturday. Down here, please put question marks before any question. It's not totally necessary. It helps me see them in the stream. And please only ask any one question the one time. I'll get to it in the sequence that I get them. Robert, you say you've heard me make statements saying I don't play very well. Well, thank you very much. I used to play really well. I used to actually be able to play all the Metallica stuff, all the Rush stuff, all the Vernon Reid stuff. Not all the solos as fast as he did, but all the Cult of Personality and Open Letter to Landlord, all that stuff. Then my ring finger met a wood planer. I don't know if you can see that. It's missing. It's fleshed out, but that was down to the bone and just a skin graft, and it has fleshed out over the last 30 years. But that also took out this cluster of nerves all in this hand. For some reason, the damage here just took out my nerve cluster. And I have very little control over these two fingers. It's slowed down the entire left hand, and I can't apply vibrato to a bend, which is why I love one of these, so I can put a little bit of expression on it. But I remember how to play, which is almost worse than never knowing how to play, because it's difficult sometimes doing a guitar channel on YouTube when people do drive-bys and they see me play and they're like, you're terrible, because they're comparing me to, there are 3-year-olds playing Eruption on YouTube. There are people who are incredibly talented out there in the world today, and there's so much information. People can progress much faster than they did back in the day when we had to drop the needle on the record, then pick it up, then drop it back, and then drop it back, or hit rewind on the cassette recorder and hope that the counter was at all accurate. But my channel is not about how to be a good guitarist. My channel is, if you are a good guitarist, what do you plug the fucking thing into? So, I let a lot of that roll off my back, but occasionally it gets on my nerves. But anyway, let's get to everyone's questions. At the beginning of the stream, they're kind of jumbled out of order, and then they get into the sequence they were asked. So, hey, Greg. Catch you later, man. Stratman, I saw that Brad already took care of you, on the lowering B+. You may not need to. Always measure your B+ with the tubes loaded and warmed up, as Brad said, and that if it's still too high, though I doubt it would be, then the 5U4GB is the answer. Let's see. Hey, Bob Adam, 9073. Yeah, okay. You got the Super Reverb with was the balance pot, now it's the bias pot. The 4-lug, you don't use the fourth lug on that. Amp is black-faced. What is the best value cap for the bias board? Look at the 64 Deluxe Reverb I put up a couple weeks ago, maybe a week ago. I use a 47 for the main one, then I add a second cap from the wiper to ground on the bias pot. You can see that clearly in that video. And having two capacitors, so 47 then 22, with whatever resistance is between lugs 1 and 2 of the bias pot, which typically is going to be maybe 5K-ish, 3 to 5K, gives a lot better hum reduction than just one very large cap on the bias board itself. And you don't want to have any more than 100 there because of charge times. You want the bias always to be fully charged before the plates of the output tubes can contribute to anything, especially if you were to power the amp off and then right back on. So as small value as you can get away with is the answer. So I find a 47 and then an additional 22 is the solution. And if you look at both the 70s circuit, where they had 70 then 70, and the modern Deluxe Reverb reissue, but same for the Twin Reverb reissue, where they have 100 or 47 and then an additional 22, which is again between the wiper and ground of the bias pot, they're doing the same thing. I'm not alone in realizing, hey, this is the better way to do it. And it kind of comes from how Leo did it on the 58 Bassman and 58 Twin, etc. Let's see, where were we? And thank you for enjoying my videos. I enjoy some of them. By the time you get to see them, I've already seen the damn video 13 times because I'm doing the editing and checking that all my levels are good and that I don't have clipping. Like I had clipping on the guitar. Of course, it's very loud in the room. This is 50 watt with the master volume at noon. It's still loud in here. On the produced videos, you never get to hear mistakes like that, or very rarely. Let's see. What do I suggest is the best quality for money guitar cable out there that you can buy at any big box store? Patch and guitar to amp cable. Thanks. Well, hey, Colin, rolling your own will always give you the best results. As far as patch cables, I'm not sure. I would want something that was not a molded cable. I'd want something that had dedicated plugs. And for the plugs, you want to have Switchcraft, Rian, Neutrik, or GH, I think it's called, or a few others. You don't want to have solderless. The square plugs are great too if you get a chance to get prefab patch cables with those. But you don't want the plastic molded ones because they will fail on you, and they'll fail on you when you need them not to. As far as instrument cables go, the Mogami is the best bang for buck because you're going to get really good quality stuff without paying extra for snake oil like you get with Evidence and some of the silver stranded made from the hairs of 40 young virgins, etc. stuff that they'll try to sell you. But if you need to save money, you can get a Rapco. You can get a, what's it called? It begins with an H. Rapco, I don't remember the brand. It begins with an H. I've certainly used my share of them. And they're fine. They're not going to last as long. They're not going to be as reliable. But they do. Hosa. But if you just go buy a Hosa or a Rapco, which has a pretty good quality cable with a Switchcraft plug, and it lasts, a year or two, for 30 bucks, you got 30 bucks worth. If you spend 50 to 60, you get the Mogami, unless someone drops a cymbal on it, etc., because that can happen. You're going to have a cable that's going to hold up a lot longer. The materials have less memory. They don't get as fragile with exposure to oxygen and dirt, etc. So there's a reason to get the Mogami. It's not because you magically sound better. It's because you're going to have a lot of tactile benefits to having a more flexible cable that is just a little bit higher quality. And if you really want to spend your money in the right place for playing live, these Neutrik silent plugs are the shit. Let me cover my face so you can see it. This thing here, push it in like it goes to, it's like in the guitar. That way you can change guitars on stage without a big pop. Little things like that, but not a big pop. Because the white noise of this amp is distracting to me, I'm going to put it in standby for right now. I don't like in the background. It's way in the background, but beneath the level of what you would hear when playing, but it's still much noisier than I would like it to be. I did put sheet metal on the bottom here, the sheet aluminum flashing on the bottom of this that's glued. I used some 3M 777 super adhesive, and I taped off the area on the bottom where I wanted the adhesive to be. And I sprayed that, and I sprayed the back of the metal after it was cut to size, and I let it sit for about 5 minutes, put it together, and it, you have to get it right. You have one shot, but I got it. And then once that set up for a while, I drilled out the holes in it to take the bolts. Then when I put the old feet back in place, I realized that on the old feet, the little metal disc in there had pushed through the rubber, and so there was a pretty sizable gap between the bottom of the chassis and the cabinet and the bottom of the feet. So he's got new feet as well. That was the work beyond fixing the squeal. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. I'll put that towards my coffee fund. Hey, Robbie F., thank you for spending time with me. Let's see. I guess boutique builders get around Underwriter Labs code because not permanent to location and too small and irregular numbers. I think that a lot of them are just getting lucky. I know I was speaking. I don't want to speak out of school, so I won't say to whom I was speaking. But I know that one person, at least, was involved with a company that was doing such things, and they got busted, and they had a 5,000 euro fine or 10,000 euro fine per item imported into the country. They had to ship them all back, bring them to the EU code, and get them inspected. They lost a lot of money trying to skip that step, but it does make for a very unfair playing field when you have companies like Sir and Friedman who are doing it right and paying $10,000 sometimes per model to get it certified for sales in Europe, versus something that's just kind of slapped together and put out there and just for some reason does not trigger the inspection fees. But buying the CE sticker off eBay does not count. Let's see how to explain how the UniValve deals with bias on so many types of tubes and the output impedances. Had a bivalve, and you could use 1 or 2 power tubes or even mix them. 6K6 with the KT88. Well, I've not had the bivalve in. I assume they're doing something similar. It's just cathode bias, and I'm sure that they just have individual bias resistors and bias caps per tube on the UniValve, on the bivalve rather. And then for the UniValve, there's a high and low voltage selected switch. So if you're using EL84s with the adapters or 6V6, use the low voltage setting. And so none of them are going to be running ideally. Probably, I would imagine that most EL34s and most 6L6s and hence most KT66s are going to be pretty happy. Maybe a KT88 might be running a little bit cold and some others might be running a little bit warm, but odds are it's going to even out. One of the other names that used to be used for cathode biased is self-biasing. And that's a big part of the UniValve trick, and I'm sure it's what they're doing on the bivalve. I believe the bivalve is just that, but I've not had one of those in. I do not know Angel of Death, sorry. Or Hammer Smashed Face. I'm not as metal as you, Brad. I'll have to listen back and see if I fix that clipping when I turn the pre down. It's hard to tell what's pre-clipping on this because this is a very aggressive sounding amp. Hey, I cannot. Erkin Alpha? Yeah, good. Always start off with things that won't waste your money, get you electrocuted, or go up in a big ball of fire if you make a mistake. So make a whole bunch of pedals before you build a tube amp. And then once you get all your technique together, you understand what you're doing, then a deluxe would be great. But a Maestro Fuzz is a cool place to start. Is the Amp RX brown box snake oil? And is it worth it even for modern amps, or more specifically modern amp kits of older designs, 5E3, etc.? It is not snake oil. It is a bucking transformer with selectable taps, so you can roll off by 6 volts or 12 volts or whatever. And it's kind of rough and ready in that you can only do this many volts off whatever's coming in. So you just have to have a target ballpark to be in mind. It's not as precise as a Variac, but it's a lot smaller and a lot lighter than a Variac. Within reason, it's a great option. It tends to be relatively expensive for what you get, I think, but it is a good tool. Maybe just the cost might be that they can only afford to make so many chassis at a time. Doing stuff on a small scale is expensive, and he's doing it at a high quality level. There are other options. If you're at home, you can use a Variac. You can get an UPC for computers and set it to either 110 or 100, and it won't vary, or 120, 110 or 120. It won't vary more than a volt, and you can get one of those for like $90. A Variac gives you much more control, but it's going to be still proportionate to whatever was coming in. It's kind of reduced by the same amount, the same way the brown box does. And a Variac is large and heavy. It's not necessary on a modern amp unless you were to set it so that If you knew your wall voltage coming in was 127 and you set it to -6, so you're at 121, that would be a use for the brown box. But if you're in a place where your wall voltage never exceeds 123, 125, you do not need it. As to modern amp kits of older designs, typically no. Typically no, because usually the transformers are built to work with modern wall voltages. But if you have an exception to that and you're like, oh my, I built this thing and the heaters are at 6.7, yeah, you can use a brown box, get them down to 6.2 to 6.5. It's not necessary typically, but it is not a bad option to have. It is relatively expensive, and you be aware of the current limitation. You cannot power 4 different amps from it at once. How do you practice high-gain songs? Does it make sense to play them acoustically and then mix it in with some amp time? I'm probably not the right person to ask. I think you should ask Leon Todd that. But what I have always done is I have learned this stuff clean and slow. Like, I'm not plugged, the amp's off right now, but, you know, if I were to work on the chugga chugga chugga, I think he's doing triplets on that. So triplet, I would just build it up. And then be like, okay, my hand's open on that. You can't see it, but be like, my hand's open on that. I need to keep my hand closed so I have less momentum. And I just sit on the couch or with a metronome and just work on that one thing. And with a metronome, and then do that for 10 minutes. Do something else and come back to that. Bring the metronome up a few beats per minute until you can do it. I'm not the right person to ask that. You know, and for the arpeggios and stuff, clean. Now there are techniques, some of the sweep picking stuff that Leon Todd does, or some legato techniques you need to have a little bit of drive and gain. But I think working on that kind of stuff acoustically, even if it's not going to have the right sound, your pinky gets a lot stronger for some of those legato licks on acoustic than it does with 9s or 8s or whatever. So, but I can teach someone guitar as far as chords and music theory and diatonic chord progressions, and when a chord doesn't fall in a key, why that makes sense. But in terms of the nuts and bolts, I'm no one's guitar teacher. I'm not the minutia of picking and fingering. But if someone wants to talk to me about why, hey, how come the Beatles had an E7 in this song when the song's in C, I can explain all that and make it make sense to people. Is 50 volts sufficient for your Fender bias pot mod? Got a spare 25 microfarad? Yeah. Well, I would not use 50 volts in a bias because the bias at its coldest may be in the 50 to 60 volt range. I typically use 63 volts for the second cap, and I use 100 volts for primary cap. So I would suggest 63 or 100 volts. But I use the 22 microfarad 63 volts because I've got them, and I know that when the preceding stage is healthy, I'm not going to have more than 50 volts positive, negative there at all. It's hard to talk about larger negative voltages. Negative 50 volts is pretty much where it's going to max out, so the 63 volts is fine. If I had 100 microfarad caps, that'd be even better. I'm ambivalent about social distortion. I have no problem with the social distortion, but all their songs tend to sound much the same to me. But people like that sound. Husker Du had terrible production on their records. Amen. It was god awful. They had no money, or whatever money they had, they spent on speed. But that's part of the charm. Maybe they're the last great garage rock act, but the songs were there, and the performance was there. I mean, I love their cover of the Mary Tyler Moore theme, so there you go. What is my opinion of the Bogner Ecstasy 20th Anniversary 101A? I have no opinion. I did not know they made it. I've had an Ecstasy in, but it was a long time ago, and I don't have much memory of it. Sorry. Ween. Ah, man, I loved Ween for two reasons. First of all, I used to work at a record shop, and when it was time for the customers to go home, we would either reach for chocolate and cheese and push them little daisies right out of the store, or we'd reach for William Shatner, the Transform Man. Hey, Mr. Tambourine Man, play a song for me in your jingle morning. And people would leave. But my wife, Nikki, who is adorable, if we ever do karaoke, and if they have Push the Little Daisy, she knows every line, and she can do the voice, and it is a thing of joy. She also knows almost every lyric to almost every They Might Be a Giant song, and that is so goddamn hot. She makes a little birdhouse in my soul. What's the difference between the Bassman 100 and the twin dual Showman circuits other than the absence of reverb and tremolo? The absence of reverb and tremolo. You basically have two normal channels in a Bassman 100, and that's fine. It's a good amp. But I do like the reverb and tremolo in those amps. The reverb gives a little more gain, a little more high-end air, but you also get a correspondingly slightly higher noise floor. Any recommendations for an entry-level oscilloscope? Mine was less than $200. I don't remember the model number, but it's in the description of this video and every video I've put up for the past several years. And it's the one that Brad told me to get. And because Brad knows all those tools better than I do, I just do what Brad tells me. And so that's the one I have. It was less than $200. Ooh, good. And ouch, 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 ouch. And I say that having experienced a parallel thing. Though a deli slicer at least gives you a nice clean cut. A wood planer, not so much. Hey, Sash. Are power transformers designed in consequence of the power tubes used in an amp, or does it not matter as much opposed to output transformer which requires specific power tubes? Well, power transformers have an HT secondary, which is designed to give X amount of AC voltage up to this amount of current being drawn. If more current than that is drawn, the voltage will drop. If a lot less current than that is drawn, the voltage will go higher. And so when you choose a power transformer, you want to say, hey, I want to have a B plus of X, and I expect the current draw from the secondary to be in the neighborhood of Y, and that helps you choose, okay, I'm going to get 300, 250, et cetera, 250 milliamp, et cetera, et cetera. So those are the rough things you need to look at. You don't need a ton of current if you're doing a single-ended amp with one EL84. You don't want to have too little current if you've got 6 6550s, et cetera. And so if you want to have a B plus of 500 volts with 6 6550s, you have to know that, hey, this amp can supply X AC voltage on its secondary at Y current demand. You think that adding a tone pot to the reverb return on a Fender amp could help in getting the drip sound of an external Fender 6G15 unit? No. The tone makes it darker or brighter. The drip, the stock, but the brighter is just not rolling off any highs, and that's what you already have in the standard Fender. There's more gain available to drive the tube in a standalone unit, and the standalone unit has got a much more efficient tube than you'd find with a 12AT7. But I've played lots of old Fenders with the standard deluxe reverb, twin reverb, super reverb, reverb stage that has plenty of that drip most of that's the tank, and a lot of modern tanks don't do the drip thing because they're too dark. The closest consistent ones that I found are the Mojotone medium decay, which is a 2A, B, C, 2, whatever. It's supposed to the 3A. And the Surfy Bear unit, which sounds really good, but is built by Accutronics, Belton Accutronics, and has the same crappy quick connects and plastic jacks. I don't trust its longevity. Other than that, it's a nice sounding tank. Yeah. You don't fix hum with large value caps, especially in the bias. But, you know, data sheets, who reads those things? Thanks, Joachim. They're really nice amps. They're not for everyone as far as the sound goes. They're a little bit rounded on the attack. You don't have much control over the mids, and the cleans are very low volume. But, you know, I certainly enjoyed one for a good long while. They're beautiful objects to have in your house, and for a amp to have at home, especially with the hot plate. They're fantastic, but they're not really that versatile, though you think they would be. But they are cathode biased amps with two pimp tubes. I would argue against Evidence cables. They're not incredible. They're just really expensive. Evidence makes a lot of claims with no evidence. They talk about directionality. Your signal coming out of your guitar is an AC signal. It is impossible for there to be a unidirectional AC signal, or for the direction to matter, because it's going both directions at the same time. Brad could explain it better than I can, but you cannot have an AC signal which is directional. You can have a telescoped shield, which is what most of these things are talking about, really. And you can telescope a shield on almost any cable if you need to, but there's no, you know, the siren and all that. It's hogwash. It's very overpriced hogwash. Hey, Brett, everyone did enjoy your amps. Brett's amps this week were the two UniValves and this bad boy. Say hey, Brett. Sorry, I left my synclavier in the other room. Sound like Woody Allen back when that was something people wanted to sound like. Sorry, I left my synclavier in the other room. If a man said that to me. Did I know that in 3 days is the 11th anniversary of my first ever video? Wow, I did not. It's probably almost my first anniversary of my first really good video. So, yeah. Yeah, that's a trick. I'm seeing something in real time. Our Guitar 78 says, the guitar sounds amazing and amazingly loud compared to my voice. Good times. That's the real trick to get the guitar to sound loud on here, because it's due to the way YouTube wants things to work. And as you know, that's a very saturated sound, which helps. But a lot of guitar sounds, the peak is up here and the core of it's down here. And so if you squash it so that it sounds loud on YouTube, you're taking all the playing dynamics out. But, you know, if you don't, then the peak's up here, so your bulk's here, and it's hard to get it loud. It's a balancing act. I'm able to do it usually much better in the produced videos. But live, it's tricky. Okay, Willis 77799 says, update, my Rigol scope that was under $200 is now $350 on Amazon, which is welcome to 2026, people. Though that may be changing depending on if we have a further constitutional crisis here or not. But man, tariffs are nuts. But yeah, $350 is still not a lot to pay for all things considered, for high quality scope. It's just painful that it's $150 more than it used to be. Let's see. Would painting the slider board for a JMI chassis with shielding paint accomplish proper shielding? No. It would just give you a metallic substance that could flake off and cause zapping. The slider board does not. There's nothing on the slider board that's sensitive that needs to be shielded. Really, that's all power stuff, power tube stuff. The signal going to the tubes, that you get common mode cancellation. There's no need to shield in any way the slider board. What you do is you put some aluminum foil, or if you want to, you can cut out some aluminum flashing and put on the back panel, so that when it is installed against the chassis, the aluminum foil or flashing is pressed up against that metal chassis, and then you're shielding the preamp side of things. But you don't want to mess with the slider board. I have had very, here's the thing. Low capacitance cables are cool if you have low impedance signals. So if you are going into, have a standard high quality but medium, let's say medium capacitance cable, say a 20-foot Canare or Belton or Mogami cable, into a very good quality buffer, and then everything after that is low capacitance cable to the amp, you're fine, because the low capacitance cable with the buffer, the only thing that's heard is that 20 feet from the guitar to your buffer, which is kind of nice. We actually do like that slight capacitance, very harsh high-end roll-off that a little bit of capacitance in our cable gives us. Not as much as like an old curly cable like Hendrix used, but just a good quality, not high capacitance, but not ultra low capacitance cable. But if you use all low capacitance cables without a buffer, so your signal stays high impedance, you're making a very long, flexible, whippable microphone, and you're going to have handling noise, and footsteps on the stage will get picked up by it. It's not a good thing. So capacitance is one part of the puzzle. So on my little pedal board, the first thing my guitar goes into, besides the little interface box I built, is a Polytune tuner, which has a very good sounding buffer in it. I could use low capacitance cables for everything else after that, but I'm only doing another 10 feet to the amp from there. I'm not taking this out on a huge stage or anything. So I have on the pedal board Canare G4, which is lowish but not low capacitance. And from there, I've got another 10 foot of standard Mogami 2624, whatever it is, to the amp. So I have a low to medium low, a medium low capacitance setup, and that's great. But if I didn't have this buffer and I used truly low capacitance cables, I would have very noisy setup, especially with a high gain amp like this. You'd be hearing, every time I moved, it would make a rustling sound, unless it never contacted the ground. So I'm not saying you're wrong, Robbie, to like their ultra-low capacitance cabling, but hopefully you're using, Runway Audio also sold you a really nice buffer. Hey, Robbie. No, the UK, EU, and Australia all have laws and codes for mains, wiring, and fuses. Anything like that in the US? Absolutely there is. When I say that these amps are violating safety code, that's not me making shit up. That's the National Electronic Codes. You know, any device which carries X amount of current must be fused independently of the wall, and the fuse must be before the power switch, and the ground must have a dedicated connection to chassis, and it must not, you know, if it's IEC, it must be short, either green or green and yellow striped, going to its own terminal as close as physically possible. If it's a old grandfathered in 3-conductor cable like we use in the guitar amps where it's not IEC, it's a hardwired cable, then the ground must be longer than the neutral and the hot. The hot must go to fuse and to switch. The neutral in the US can either go directly to a power transformer primary, or it can also be switched. It's best to also switch, but I'm not going to replace a single pole switch in an old Fender with a double pole switch just for that. But if I were building a new amp that I intended to sell across the world, I'd use a double pole single throw power switch, and I'd switch both primary, at the same time. I'd switch the hot and neutral at the same time, so my wiring would not need to change depending on the country it was going to. The fuses would change, and the transformer would change, or the secondaries, or the primary connections on the transformer might change, but the wiring inside the amp would be consistent. Yes, we absolutely do have that, but most of the people out there copying what Leo did in 1957 have no idea what they're doing. And so we get all these amps on the market that are wired as if it's 1963. Favorite Alex Lifeson solo? You like Roll the Bones. Yeah, well, he winged, kind of, sort of winged all his solos, but he would comp, he'd listen back to a bunch of wing takes and then comp out things. I don't know about Roll the Bones. His solo on Roll the Bones is good, but that song doesn't work for me. I don't know if I have a favorite. I really love Via Strangiata. I love Xanadu. I love YYZ. I'll say Z in Alex's honor. The Enemy Within is cool. A lot of the stuff on Grace and Signals is really amazing. I get tired of Tom Sawyer. I get tired of. I'm even tired of Limelight because it's played so much. Limelight is kind of his Comfortably Numb. It was fantastic the first jillion times. But Lifeson's got so much good stuff. I wish he were here. He would sound really good with this Strat through this amp. On this Strat, by the way, I have this switch here which puts this Sir Thornbucker in series mode with itself. And that sounds an awful lot like that Evans single coil that he used around the time from Hold Your Fire through Roll the Bones. It's really good for that time stand still kind of thing. Anyway, yeah, I'm a huge Alex Lifeson fan, but I don't know if I'd have a single favorite solo. Makes me want to go back and listen to a bunch. I'll probably put on Farewell to Kings this afternoon as I walk around the neighborhood. Hey, Sam Freeman. Very good. Well, we are here to serve, Sam. At least I am. I don't know what Brad's doing. All right. Gooden, I'm reading what you just said. I just want you to know that right next to your comment, I have the option to ban you. And that's awfully close to ban worthy. Even I have standards, dude. Come on. Do I prefer pork ribs that are made with dry rub or barbecue sauce? Sauce is served on the table and it's optional. Spare ribs, St. Louis style spare ribs, so trim spare ribs, should always be done with a dry rub. Otherwise, they hold on too much fat. If you sauce them up in the smoker, they're either gonna not drain off all the fat, or you're gonna char or overly darken the sugar in the sauce. Most sauces around here have sugar. I prefer vinegar sauce myself, but if you were in town, I could take you to 4 different places, and we get the dry ribs at each one of them. But at a barbecue shop, I'd order the glaze, which is where they cook them dry, and at the last minute they put sauce on and they cover it in foil so it kind of becomes moist, but it still has the flavor of the dry. But I don't like a sticky burnt sugar sauce rib. A good rib is accentuated by the sauce. It's like a good steak. If you go to Peter Luger's, yeah, they've got sauce options. But if you go to Peter Luger's, the steak should be good enough. You don't need any of that stuff. It's not like you just got crappy steak that John at A1 or Heinz 57 just to make it have some flavor. A good steak needs salt, pepper, maybe some garlic. And now I'm hungry. Hey, Patrick Pierce, I will see your message in regular chat. I'm looking for it. Was it already here or is it coming afterwards? I don't think I missed it, did I? Let's see. Well, it looks like you did find the super chat button. I will go back up and look, Patrick. Did I already answer it and have forgotten that it was Patrick Pierce? Or is it coming afterwards? I'm looking. Well, Patrick, I don't see it. Ask it again right now. I'm gonna get to Jaguar Yes Please's question right before the super chat, but ask the question that the message again, and I'll answer it because I can see the real time as well. Jaguar Yes Please says 70s Musicmaster as a practice amp. If I already own a Princeton Reverb, worth it or basically the same role? No, the Princeton's so much better than the 70s Musicmaster. You don't need the 70s Musicmaster if you already have a Princeton. Just stick with your Princeton. It's a better amp. You already have it. And the Musicmaster is just slightly louder, blander version of kind of the same role. Thanks, Bob Adam. Appreciate you, man. Hey, Sam's working on modified Vibro Champ. Very cool. Yeah, you don't have to go crazy on a Vibro Champ. The main thing is if you're not using the what do you call it? Second, someone's at the front door. Right back. Someone's running for something. God dang, these things, it keeps creeping up on me. I don't know why it's changing on me. I need to look into that. Anyway, what was I saying? If you don't have a multi-section can cap, then you have a lot of freedom. And like you see in the Bassman that I just put up last week, the 59 Bassman, you can do your Vibro Champ exactly the same way, which is the same way that I did pretty much in that 61 Princeton, which is you can just say, hey, here's the reservoir cap. And it's going to go to the ground over by the power transformer, along with the HC center tap. And here's everything else tied together, going closer to the input jack. That's all you need to do. But if you want to go the full Merlin and have every cap go to a chassis or go to a common ground at any rate in sequence with their stages, that's fine too. It's just a little bit harder to do that unless you're doing a fully custom board, which you may be. I'm not seeing Patrick's question anywhere. There it is. All right, good shirt. Oh, cool. Playing Breath of the Wild with your daughter for the first time. Think about a Princeton for smaller gigs and to run dual mono with an AC15. Any suggestions, modern or affordable vintage? I think the Fender 65 reissue Princeton, Patrick, is a very good amp. And for not a lot of money can be made into a even more reliable, very good amp. Sometimes the speakers they came with are a little bit naff, but it's easy to change out the speaker. I think the Princeton and dual mono with an AC15 would be a really good rig. Know, however, that the AC15, unless you keep the master volume pretty low, is going to drown out a Princeton on stage. Deluxe Reverb is the better pairing with an AC15 as far as comparable volume levels. But you can do it with the Princeton. You just want to keep either your preamp kind of low or your master volume on the lower side with the AC15. It'd be a very comfortable rig to take places. I would also say that maybe rather than running dual mono, you may have more creative joy from using an ABY. So you could have, here's my clean, this kind of clean sound, here's my this kind of clean sound, because they're different characteristics and they're going to bring out different aspects of your playing. But I can't make that decision for you. But unless you want to spend enough money to get one of the old ones, pick up a used 65 reissue in good shape. Watch my videos on reliability upgrades, because they're not expensive or difficult. Have those done, and you're going to have an amp that sounds fantastic. And then the only variable that really matters at that point, are you happy with the speaker? If not, there are a lot of great speakers out there in the world. And I like it. I like the 10-inch speaker in a Princeton. I think Princeton's with that cab sound better with a 10-inch. Let's see. I have not had any experience with the Guild Slim Jim archtops. I've not had much experience with the late 60s Guild electrics at all, but I'm sure there's a lot of information on the internet for people who do, but it is not me. Getting obsessed with getting a late 70s Strat. Have I had much experience with them? Oh my God. Beyond the weight, what's your take on the pickups and overall tone? Well, the weight's a constant. The overall tone and playability varies wildly. As the 70s progressed, Fender was getting worse and worse, to the point where up to like 82, they were just getting awful. There are occasional good ones, but they were just getting really heavy and really losing the plot. So I'm not a huge fan of most post 73 Fenders. I don't like the 3-bolt neck attachment. It's not so much that the attachment method was bad, as it is that the tolerances of the factory got so bad that the pocket was usually oversized for the neck, and so 3 bolts was not enough to hold it straight. It was always going to be a kind of an angle, not making good electrical mechanical contact. Is kind of the big the diagonal F tuners and the 3-bolt neck plate are kind of visual cues to you that the company was saving the wrong pennies. So I'd rather have any of the various reissue Fender options in a late 70s Strat. And given the price now of late 70s Strats, you can get a big headstock version of this kind of thing. This is a Musiccraft neck on a Fender body with a, I just got I don't remember what Strat Deluxe body I found at, I don't remember the name of the company. It begins with an S. They part out old Strats, and I put this is basically I was building a Sur on a budget. So I got the 510, I got the Thornbuckers, and these are the, I started with the Sur pickups for these, but I didn't like the buzz for using with higher gain amps. So these are the Mojotone 63s or whatever, the quiet coils. So this is polyester. Sounds great. It's heavy, but especially in comparison to my K-line, but it's a good guitar. I'd like John Georgia says, I'd get a made in Japan 70s Strat before I get a 70s Strat. The sunbursts on the made in Japan ones are kind of crappy because you can see all the seams in the basswood, but get a black one or a white one and go to town. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with a polyester body. Unless it's a 70s Strat where the polyester is that thick. I have mixed opinions on the Mojotone amplifier kits. It's going to depend on who builds it. The kit itself is quite good. Most people building kits don't know how to build them. So I hope that you are the exception. But as far as, hey, I need to buy a kit to build an amp, is Mojotone a good choice? Yes, they are absolutely a very good choice to build a Princeton Reverb kit. but any kit is only as good as the build. For instance, it doesn't matter how good the Formula One car is. If I'm driving it, we're not going to cross the finish line anywhere close to where others are. I'll get it across eventually. I may kill the transmission in the process, but, you know, that's not what I do. And people think that anyone can, if they can drive their car, they can drive that stuff. They see guys like me and Brad doing this, and I can do that. Some of them can. And I hope that you are one of the ones who can. Favorite 90s alternative bands, if any? I've got so many. Though most of my favorite alternative bands were the 80s, back when they were alternative. And then by the 90s, that was kind of approaching mainstream. I mean, do Radiohead and Wilco really count as alternative bands? If so, those guys. Pixies. Yeah, I'm not fitting in an F1, Ted. Yeah. I don't even fit in old Porsches, sadly. One that I've had in my head all week is, like three of you will get this. I've had Whale, Hobo Humping Slobo Babe stuck in my head, which is such a great, weird track. Sonic Youth, yeah. Oh my God. Bull in the Heather. Kim Gordon was so hot in that. Anyway, yeah. I mean, the trouble is, I saw Nirvana, and they were really cool. And 2 weeks later, MTV discovered Nevermind, and it became an entirely other thing. But I saw them in a club that held like 400 people, and they're just one more alternative band on the road on a Tuesday night or something. But then grunge became a thing, and I loved Soundgarden. I had Loud Love before grunge became a thing. Pixies, Sonic Youth, like I said before, Husker Du, who led to a lot of that stuff. I could probably sit down and just think for the next 30 minutes, but we are at the top of the first hour. We're going to take our first of 2 7-minute intermissions, and we will come back in just a few 7 minutes, and we'll resume with people's questions. Everyone go get a sandwich, get a Coke, whatever you need to do, and I'll see you in a few. Let's see here. Next question up. Why does the bias board of my 69 or 70 Super Reverb have a 1K resistor when the schematic says it should have been 470K? 470 ohms, rather. Sorry. Well, because they were probably out of 470 ohms, and 1K would work just fine. Fender was pretty common much in the practice of, hey, that'll work. Or someone made a slight mistake, but it's not a big major mistake. You're not going to hear much difference. It's going to form a tiny, tiny voltage divider with the pot, tiniest of possible voltage dividers. But the main goal there is just to limit the current through the diode. Yeah, I barely use a fraction of what the Rigol can do. But the parts that I do use, it does very, very well. Though I do wish the screen had a little bit more resolution, but I'm spoiled by all our phones and iPads these days. Man, the weather keeps changing like crazy. So I will subject you to 335 through the train wreck, but only after I'm in a semblance of being in tune, because as the guitar was just sitting around as the temperature keeps swinging 30 degrees every couple of days, it was an unhappy thing. Would have been a real train wreck. Now, one of the tricks to the real train wrecks is some of them didn't have any grid stoppers on the input, so they were not stable, but they were extremely responsive to pick up resonance frequencies and playing dynamics. And that's not something most people need to play around with, because you have to have the entire rest of the amp just on the verge of being stable for it to do what you need it to do. Let's see. Thanks, Flesh84. Have I worked on the Mesa Badlanders yet? No, I doubt they're changing their ways. I don't think that Gibson, when it comes to amps, has ever been a good sign. I would not expect much from the current production Mesas. I haven't expected that much from the old ones. But if one comes in and it's fantastic, I will tell everyone. I will be glad to say, hey, someone's finally making a good Mesa. But until that day comes, I remain a skeptic. Thank you very much for the super chat. Different question. You know what they charge for shipping combo amps? Probably a stupid question, but do you have a secret? I might not know. It's 55 pounds for like 175 from Maine to Florida. Your rates are going to depend on the weight and the size and the shipping company. I don't know what the combo is. If it's a twin, that makes sense. It's not a cheap thing. I don't see how some of the large companies like Sweetwater can afford to do free shipping on big, heavy things, but they do. I think that they just eat a lot of it, the cost. But I can't tell you secrets other than whenever possible, I just have customers ship the chassis to me. But in terms of selling amps, if it's from Maine to Florida and it's a large, heavy amp, yeah. And like Mullet says here, try Greyhound or other bus companies. Sometimes they'll do things much cheaper. They're going there anyway. Yeah, THD amps were really well built. I think the Flexi 50 was the most versatile one that they had out. I'm not sure why they went away, but it's hard to run a small business, especially when his amps did not have many bells and whistles. There was pressure. I think there was an effects loop on the Flexi 50, but it wasn't channel changing and stuff, and there was so much, and there was MIDI stuff hitting the market at that time, and I don't know. It's hard to keep up with the competition, even when your stuff is better. Can I get, hey, Flesh84, thanks, man. Can I get that chiseled, compressed, modern metal sound out of a BE100 by an EQ and compression pedal in the effects loop? I assume that you're chasing the sound of a recording. In recordings, most of what you're referring to there is done after the fact. So you mic the amp, and you get the basic sound of the amp in. I'm running a little bit of EQ and compression on this just to keep the levels right for you guys, but .335 speakers 10 feet over there. I would need to turn like this for that not to happen. But most of that, if you put that in the effects loop, it'd sound like an approximation of what you're going for. That really needs to be applied to the sound of the mic on this speaker after the recording. Otherwise, it's going to affect what you actually play so much. You can play around with it. That's how people end up with great big racks. I guess probably the best way to see how to get there these days would be see what Def Leppard's running in their racks. I think there's all fractal stuff at this point. I think Def Leppard is using the FX3 or whatever it is these days with a Marshall. I think they might still be using the Marshall JMP preamps and then fractal for everything else, because then they can pretty much reproduce their studio setup live, and because they're hearing it in in-ears and it's just going to front of house. There's no cabs involved, but that takes a lot of money. You have to have your own monitor mixer and your own monitors, your own PA and everything. So it's really tricky to say, hey, just do this. You can try running that stuff in the effects loop of a BE100, but you're not gonna. I don't think the BE100 is really the best choice for that. The BE100 is a little bit closer to this Trainwreck and being a very compressed Marshall kind of thing. With a pretty tight tight power section, but it's not the same thing as, say, like the Randall stuff that Dimebag was using. There's a role for solid state in this world. Let me turn down the power up a little bit here. Yeah, it's a lot more controlled with the master turned down just a little bit. No pedals. Never had one lesson. So, man, yeah, that's that setup right there. Even though that's not the best example, I think, of what that could be. That's why I don't much care for pedals. And I do think that Brad's right there talking about the 5150 Uberschall thing for the compressed, chiseled, scooped kind of metal thing. I would also say, I think the Bogner a little bit more so than the 5150. The 5150, or if you want to throw some serious money at it, the SLO with the nasal cap removed. And I think, or talk to Dave Friedman and say, hey, Dave, these are the sounds I like. Which of your amps, if any, do this? But I think the BE100 might be a little too saturated and too full for that, and not really fast on the attack. I think it's funny people say 5150 is the gold standard for modern metal, and I understand why they say that. It is really a like the worst possible way to achieve that sound as far as the build goes and design factors. And it's the SLO is a much better version of that circuit, though the voicing of the SLO is a little bit different in a fundamental way, and the way the clean's implemented is very different. I don't hate 5150 at all, but I do find the 5150 compresses in a way that makes you feel like you're a little bit disconnected from what's coming out of the speaker compared to something like this, which is like, hey, there it is. But that's all subjective. There's nothing wrong with the 5150 if it's not catching on fire because they have 20 gauge or 26 gauge wire for the heater supply for the 6L6s. And I don't like the way the output transformer is installed. It's when something goes wrong, which does happen, it's a very expensive repair. I'm not sure what the GASC59 is. I don't know. The GASC64, does that come in at a 10? Because I thought that was just a 12, but I could be wrong. I like a 10 with a Princeton. I've not tried the GA, or if there is an Eminence Alessandro, a 10-inch version, I've not tried it. I've tried the 12-inch version, and I thought it was pretty cool, but it didn't have some of the aspects of a Princeton that I prefer. Headstrong has got a 12-inch Alessandro, but you know, I don't know about the SC59. Any high gain amps I'm aware of that have an AC sounding clean channel? No. A lot of the sound of the AC30 clean is that it's not really clean, and a lot of that not clean stuff is happening in the output section. Pretty much you either have to have an AC30 and a different amp to do that, or you just bite the bullet and go all modeling. Like the Fractal stuff is pretty damn close to giving you that. On stage, the audience wouldn't know, and if you're happy with it, you'd be fine with that. I think you get closer with that than by trying to get all this stuff, all these things from one amp. Alex says Bad Cat is a kind of voxy clean. It does, but it doesn't have a high gain channel. It's not really a high gain amp, a Bad Cat. Oddly enough, the BE100 that Friedman has, the clean channel on that is very much the Vox AC30 tone stock, but it doesn't sound like an AC30 in that amp. And it doesn't have the attributes we associate with an AC30 because the output section is totally different. I would say that if you really want to do that, you would have a Vox and then maybe if you had a AC15 for your cleans and you had a 1x12 with, or a combo version of the Jake E. Lee thing that Friedman's got out. There you go. There's your 2-amp rig. There's your cleans to semi-dirty. There's your dirty to screaming dirty. That's a cool setup that would not take up, could fit both in the back of your seat of your car, would not kill your back to take to a gig. You would not get kicked off a stage for excessive volume. But each amp would be doing what it's supposed to do, as opposed to expecting one amp to do everything. Any recommendations for a 60 Tweed Bassman clone or 57 Bandmaster? Used to hear about Victoria a lot. Don't waste your money on the Fender Tweed reissues, but Victoria is great. If you want one of those amps, and Victoria is a great option for that. I have no complaint with Victoria at all. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for the kind words. That was IR Ken Alpha or Erkin Alpha. I'm not sure. Some of the usernames make me feel like I'm being set up to get them wrong on purpose. I don't expect everyone to be Bob and Stanley or Steve or whatever, but some of the combinations when there's not any capitalization, makes it hard for me to figure out when one part of the name stops and the next one begins. Hey, Corey, I don't mind. What are my thoughts on the use of dual 84s and many of the Marshall 18-watt JTM clones as opposed to single 34? Well, you're going to have a very different response from any amp when you have two tubes and a push-pull versus one tube in a single-ended design. And almost invariably, the push-pull configuration will sound better than a single-ended design. I'm not a big fan of single-ended amps, unless it's something like the little UniValve the other day, which is not a high-volume amp, or not trying to be, but it's also kind of limited in its dynamic range. As far as the 18-watt Marshall clones, well, that's what Marshall used in their 1980. What's the model of the number of that? With the Marshall 18-watt, the 1974. That's what they did, and they did it because they wanted to have an amp on the market at X price point. But in England, it was much easier for them to get EL84s than for them to get 6V6s, so they went out with the EL84s. And I think the Marshall 1974 is one of the great sounding amps of all time, as is the Marshall 20-watt, whose name escapes me right now, which model number that was from the same time period. You can also do a pair of 34s with the lower B plus and get similar responses. But I like the sound of the 18-watt with the 84s an awful lot. Can I explain how your old guitar would pick up the radio? You probably had a ground loop and or a bad ground somewhere, or something in your guitar was acting as an AM antenna, most likely, or you had a wah that was always in the chain, even if it wasn't always on. Wahs are really good at picking up at radio stations. Is there any benefit at lower volumes to swapping the crossline master volume in a Vox AC15 for a Larmar? Well, the Larmar is the better sounding master volume across the board and has a much nicer taper. But, and I've had an awful lot of the AC15s come in with the cross lines. What I usually do on the AC15 cross lines is not change it out for a Larmar, because it's more invasive and it's a little bit harder to do. And there's only so much money you want to spend on what is essentially an inexpensive amp. But it comes with a 500K crossline pot. I will change. It's an audio taper. I can get the same pot that the Vox used. I'll order the 1 meg audio taper version of that, which means as you turn it down from 5 o'clock to about 3 o'clock, nothing happens at all. But below 3 o'clock, it acts like a crossline. You hear it, it works, and it works just fine. And I'm usually not trying to get true bedroom levels out of an AC15. I just want to have it so that you can use it on a stage, like I just did here, where I went down from loud, really loud, to a little less loud, but it was still loud in the room. Crossline is fine at that. It's only below like 10 o'clock that you're going to be like, yeah, it doesn't sound that great. But the important thing is the 500K pot is always attenuating signal out of your AC15 or your AC30. Whereas the 1 meg is not. The 1 meg is closer to being transparent out of the circuit. And so you can really notice a volume difference in the output of the amp going from 500K to 1 meg. The 1 meg, you have more output level. So it's more like the actual old Voxes. So counterintuitively, I'm making the amp louder by going to the 1 meg audio taper pot. And at the same time, there's very little happening from 5 o'clock to 3 o'clock because you're in the part of the range where there's not a lot of effect. But with a crossline master volume, I'm looking for it to be useful between 5 o'clock and noon. I don't care below noon. Below noon, if it's too loud, it's the wrong amp for the gig. And that's a lot of level difference between noon and 5 o'clock. So. Hey, Mitch, appreciate that. Very kind of you. I have no experience with or opinion of the Soldano SLO pedal. I've never tried one, never heard of it until now. What is the dome light bulbs for on your crossover on your PV SP2Gs? Well, Mullet, I don't know. I don't not familiar with that circuit. I imagine that it's doing something to dissipate excess wattage because so that they don't blow the crossover or blow the tweeter, because tweeters are real sensitive to that. It's really easy to nuke a tweeter from orbit. It's probably doing something to dissipate current going to the tweeter, but I don't know because I don't have familiarity with the SB2G. Sorry. Thanks, Robbie. Yeah, well, the Strat's over there now, but I'm pleased with that Strat. I wanted a 3-color burst because my EJ Strat is a 2-color burst, and I do love me a 3-color as well. Though this one's of course the Gibson 3-color as opposed to the Fender, and that one's a particularly pretty example with really pretty alder. AC30 volume pot has a small area, which should be very low volume, where it sounds like it's turned all the way up. Is this the beginning of a worn out pot or a sign of a more serious problem? Hey, Bottom Kitchen. Which AC30 is it? So you've got to, as you turn it down from like 8 to 7 o'clock, instead of going all the way off, it sounds like it's going all the way up. It sounds like the wiper may be separating from the track at that point. It could just be some dirt on that part, which is just interfering between the track and the wiper. So cleaning the pot can make that be fixed. If that doesn't do it, it's time to change out the pot. Depending on the model, that can be very easy or very difficult. So tell me the model AC30, and I'll tell you the answer to that. Hey, Scott from Baltimore. The reverb is going in and out on your Super 65 reissue. This happened once before, and I replaced V5 when it did. Okay, is there a question? Should I do the same thing before? Turn it off, change the tube, turn it on? Well, it could be as simple as that. It could also be you have a bad connection at your RCA jacks and your RCA plugs on the back of the amp or at the tank, or it could be a bad connection in the tank. But the easy way to check it is to V5 in your Super Reverb is only used for the tremolo. Stick V5 in V3. That's the reverb driver. And if your reverb comes back to life, it's not going to sound as good with the 12AX7 as it did with the AT, but if it comes back, then that's an easy way to diagnose a bad AT7. And if the reverb is still cutting out, but now it's weaker, then your AT7 reverb driver was fine. It's something else in the amp. That's the way to go about that, as far as I'm concerned. Unless you already have a whole bunch of spare AT7s. I do. Most people aren't sitting around with boxes of old tubes. Any commercially available options I prefer for guitar hangers, headstock rests, padding that's nitro safe? Starting to notice some discoloration. Yeah, that's fun. I use String Swing, and I've had no issue with their stuff on my nitro. And on the guitar stands I use closer to me, I've got the String Swing stuff up on the wall. I think you've seen that in the background of some of my videos. I've got these Ultras. This is not an endorsement unless the company wants to sponsor me. This is made, says Cayman. So Cayman Ultra stage stand. This foam has not been reactive with any of the nitro finishes, so I don't leave my nitro guitars on there for months at a time, but you know, I've had no issues with those, but definitely not the old brown rubber surgical tubing. Yeah, String Swing sell a nitro safe plush cradle cover, TPL 058. Put that up there, and it's good advice. I have my issues with some of String Swing's products and some of the components in the 5 guitar holder. The little clips need to be redesigned. They break too easily, but they're as far as the nitro goes, they're great. Hey, Dustin. Are the circuits very different between the Fender Pro Junior and 5E3? How so? Yeah, they're very, very different. The Pro Junior is kind of, sort of a bad copy of a Princeton with a lot of negative feedback and single channel, whereas the 5E3's got 2 channels, a lot more gain potential, no negative feedback, or no negative feedback in a 5E3. Very different tonal response. Very there's no tone stack in a 5E3, just a tone circuit, which either rolls off highs or puts a bright cap across the volume pot, and every variation in between. But the Pro Junior, for all its failings, has a full tone stack, which is similar to that in the Princeton. The 5E3 is a much better amp than a Pro Junior. Almost everything ever made is a better amp than the Pro Junior, except for some of the other amps that I get asked about, the $100 things from China these days. But the Pro Junior is about the same quality as a $100 thing imported from China these days. They just don't sell it for $100 for some reason. Hey, Guitar Sanctuary, what's my favorite 12AX7 these days? Man, I wish I had a better answer for you. Until about 2 weeks ago, it was the Electro-Harmonic 7025. And then Brad here got a bunch of the new batch, and they had big heater hum issues. Now, I've not ordered any new ones to try myself because the people I get my tubes from primarily are Tube Depot, and they've been out of stock on that. So when they're back in stock, I'm going to order like 6 and see if if the batch that I have are the same as the batch that were shipped to Australia. And I'd love to be able to continue to use the EH7025s, but when Brad tells me he had hum issues with several in a row, I believe him. Right now, consistently, JJ seems to have sorted out their vacuum issues where the glass would break and go white. So JJ is still a good choice, is a good choice again. And I've had good luck with the Tongue Sol 12AX7s, not in the cathode follower stage, not for V2 and a Marshall. I use a JJ there. But for most issues, I've also had heater hum issues with the 12AX7 Tongue Sols. The same way with any of the Russian-made tubes, the Tongue Sols, the Softecs, the EHs. So, there's not a single silver bullet. That's why I like the 7025s. They seem to be the best sorted of the various new sensor tubes. But we'll see. Thanks for having me back there, Brad. Yep, eventually saw Patrick's question. But yeah, it wasn't there. I'll look for it. It's so hard when it's getting lost in the shuffle. The Serotonin lawyers. That was a fun thing the other day with the Serotonin and the conversations about lawyers and all that. As a Mexican, you're taking personal that comment about the sauce on a steak. What, not even lemon? Are you sure you're not Italian? Just putting lemon on my goddamn steak? I am in the vast minority. I cannot abide the flavor or scent of lemon. It's like you put cleaning detergent on my food. I can potentially see the appeal of lemon with steak. I like if I'm having steak, I often will have a salad with vinaigrette with it because I like the contrast between the vinegary salad and the steak. And with my barbecue, I like a vinegar sauce, so I can conceptually appreciate it, but I don't like lemon. I like lime in a good amber beer. I don't like lime on a steak, but again, I can see the appeal of that vinegar contrast. If I'm gonna have steak, I want a steak where, other than salt, pepper, maybe some garlic, I'm tasting the beef itself. I don't want to have to add a bunch of other flavors to it to make it interesting, because it inherently should be fantastic by itself. But there are a lot of good sauces out there if you people want them as well. But I could not eat your chicken piccata, Wes. I would try to eat it if I were eating at your table because I'm polite, but I don't want lemon on my food. In fact, it was funny when we were in Florence, the bistecca alla Firenze, they always, the Florentine beefsteak, they always put lemon on it. I had them not put the squeeze lemon on mine, and they were very offended by that. And at the end of the meal, several times in Florence, at the end of the meal, they would bring me limoncello, the little aperitif, for health, and I would graciously decline, and they'd be actually very concerned for me that if I didn't have the limoncello after eating, that I'd like die or something, like not swimming for 30 minutes after eating or something. It's like, you must have limoncello after your meal or something bad will happen to you. I'm like, I'll risk it, thank you. But I can't do lemon. Reverse seared ribeyes with garlic butter and rosemary, that is fine with me. I'm with you on that. See, that's the thing. You get the ribeye and you do reverse sear, so you're just getting that final bit of flavor, and then an herb garlic melted onto the steak as it rests. To me, that's the way to go. I'd love it with a little bit of rosemary, maybe some thyme, or if I'm doing a steak in the winter where I don't want to go outside, I'll do a reverse sear. Then I'll put it quick sear on a really hot skillet, and then I'll take it off the heat and put some butter and a smashed bit of garlic and some thyme in it, and just kind of baste the meat in that. Jeff, the vegetarian, shows up as I'm talking about how barbaric I am. That's a good winter steak for me. I guess I could do the same for you, Jeff, with a shiitake, not shiitake, but a portobello. I could grill the hell of a portobello for you, man. I'd be glad to someday. Which would also benefit from a nice herb butter. I don't do blue cheese, or Nikki loves blue cheese and gorgonzola and all that. It tastes like what it is to me. It's like, would you like essence of toe jam on your steak? Gorgonzola, right out of the toenail. Sorry to disgust everyone, but that's how that stuff tastes to me. Is it okay to run a second amp in stereo with a two-prong plug adapter to alleviate hum? No. Never, ever lift the safety ground on an amp. Ever. You can disagree with me about stinky cheese. Don't disagree with me about this. Stinky cheese is just one opinion among many. Electrical safety is a constant. If you need to separate the audio path between two amplifiers, the best solution is to have an ABY box with a ground lift second output. You can lift the ground through the audio connection, so you won't have any buzz. You can flip the polarity. You can do all that kind of stuff with like a radial tone bone. That's the safe way to do it. You do not ever lift the safety ground on one amp, because if that is how you get zapped. And there are lots of different possible ways, scenarios I could tell you where that could happen. I'm going to save time because I waste too much time talking about stinky cheeses. Don't do that. Spend the money for a radial tone bone or other equivalent high quality splitter, which is going to give you the transformer output on the B output, where you can lift the ground and you can have invert the polarity and have control over your sound and keep yourself safe. I'm there with you for the fresh corn tortillas, and I'll have lime and piña flavors and all that with maybe some carnitas or something, but I don't want that on a steak. What idiot makes a two-prong plug adapter? Well, there's a ton of them, and they sell them at the hardware store. What people don't realize, I don't have one handy to show you, is that it has a little tab. It's for when you have a old house which does not have three-prong outlets, but you have a three-prong cord. You're supposed to put that adapter into the outlet and have the screw that holds the faceplate of the outlet go through the little hole on the outside, which ties that to the ground of the box, because the assumption there is that the box has a ground in it, even if there's no grounded connection on the receptacle. No one does that. They just run without a safety ground, and it's a bad way to do it. The U.S. electrical code is not enforced in the past tense. So you have a lot of very unsafe residences, and they have two-prong outlets, and they use two-prong adapters. So it's not the idiot who makes it. It's not the idiot who buys it. It's the idiot local codes that don't say, not only must we have this change, but we're going to subsidize bringing everyone up to safety code or whatever needs to be done. I'm not sure how that would work in our system, but it's not a good thing how unsafe most people's electricity is. What are my thoughts? Hey, Corey, in terms of the tonal accuracy of a couple of EL84s versus a single 34 when using an 18. All right, I already answered this, Corey. Besides, this is not a matter of tonal accuracy. Tonal accuracy is the wrong way to look at it. There's no such thing as tonal accuracy in any tube amp that we use. That's not the point. If I wanted to, if I were to spend the time to show you what that Strat sounds like through a good quality DI with no amplification, that's the tonal accurate sound of coming out of that guitar. It would sound like plink, 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 plink. Not a very good sound for the most part. Nothing that we do with the guitar amps is about tonal accuracy. It's about tone generation. But I already answered the question as far as single 80, pair of 84s versus single 34 in a Marshall. You've got an almost all original 65 Reverb Rocket 2 that has a tremolo that doesn't vary much with the speed knob. Well, you probably have some weak caps in the LFO circuit. There are 3 capacitors in the LFO circuit, and if those caps have drifted severely, you're not going to get much change. Or you could have a problem with the speed knob. I'd have to have your amp on the bench to tell you anything more than that, but it's probably not a very complicated fix, but it's not a fix that I can remotely promise a solution for. It can be spendy, Ted, but you can also get them relatively inexpensively, especially used. I've not tried the. Hey, Steve, I've not tried the Alessandro 10. I've tried the I've tried several of the WGS 10s, and so I've not tried the Alessandro 10-inch. I do like the G10C and the ET10 an awful lot in a Princeton. I also like the Little Buddy from Eminence pretty well, and I like the Celestian Gold 10, though that's a pretty expensive option. It doesn't sound like a traditional pairing any Princeton ever had, but it's a cool sound. King's X was another great one, Wavy 63. Yeah, always a big fan of King's X. I think I discovered them at the time of Gretchen Goes to Nebraska. Hey, Skeeter Buck, Tweed Vibrolux. I don't know about I don't know anything about the Alessandro Alnico. I have no experience with that. I'm not a big fan of the current Jensen 10 P10Rs. I would tend to go with the Weber Alnicos with the Tweed Vibrolux, because that's the closest thing to the current Weber Alnicos are the closest thing that I've experienced to the old Jensens, unless you have an old Jensens that's been reconed. The interesting thing about the Jensen made for Fender, the old ones, old Fender Jensens, the difference between the standard model and the made for Fender is on the standard model, both terminals, positive and negative, were isolated from the basket, or not from the basket, the shell, the frame, whereas the ones that they made for Fender, the negative terminal is tied to the frame. So that's one of the ways to find that out, and one of the reasons when you have old Jensens, you have to make really sure you have your hot and negative identified, and that you are not miswiring 2 speakers in the same cab. Otherwise, you'll have no sound at all because you'll be grounding out the positive, which won't hurt anything, but it sure would sound like a whole lot of nothing. And Lou taught Stone Gossard his first chords in '82 or so. Very cool. Let's see. I think where I'm now to where I was at the first intermission. So, what style reverb tank would I need for 1980 Super Reverb? I would go to Mojotone and get the medium decay tank for a Fender. Hey, Craig, it's listed as for Fender and it says medium decay and it's like $35. I think that's the price. I get a dealer price on Mojotone, so I'm not sure if I'm remembering the list or the dealer price, but they're not very expensive. I think that's the list price. Mine's like $27, but that's the tank I'd recommend. Does anyone want to start a Marshall Cleans Appreciation Club? Yeah, I love the cleans on a good Marshall. I prefer the cleans on the less bright Marshalls, but it's possible to use both channels very slightly on a super lead and just bring in a slight bit of the treble without it going too hissy. But yeah, oddly, one of my favorite Marshall cleans is the Silver Jubilee. That is a really unusual tone stack compared to all the other Marshalls. And Silver Jubilee, like the 2550, I'm not that huge a fan of some of the overdrive sounds, but the clean is phenomenal. But I mean, just give me a super lead with the 5 nanofarad cap removed. That is a beautiful sounding clean right there. And all the JTM 45s, like, and that Germino a couple weeks ago, that was a great clean. Very similar to that 59 Bassman over there. What shielded wire do I recommend? Hey, Les Paul and Marshall, you mean for inside an amp? Inside an amp, I'd say for most people, Canare G4 would be a really good choice. It's easy to come by. It's easy to work with. The stuff I tend to use is a coax that's really hard to source. I buy it in bulk from a surplus place. They don't have it all the time. When they do, I end up buying 1 to 200 feet, which lasts me a really long time. But they don't always have it, and I don't always remember the number. It's an RG something, but it's not 174 or 176. But for most people, for occasional use, you don't need to buy a spool of 200 feet or something you'll never use. Just buy 10, 20 feet of Canare G4, and you'll be absolutely fine inside an amp. Hey, Alec, thank you. Appreciate that. Let's see. You've been looking for a local amp tech to mod your AC15C1. Do I have a list I could reference? If I don't give out the mods. It's not that I'm wanting people to send the amps to me. I realize that people are not. Even if I could not accept all the amps that people want to send to me, and they're people in other parts of the world, but I don't give out the mods because I know that then people will start doing them themselves who aren't qualified to. I give out most of what I do in the videos. So I show what I do, and any tech who's capable and qualified to do that work can see what I did and say, okay, that's what they're doing. And I look at the schematic, okay, that's why. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's do that. Anyone who's just copying and pasting, tab A goes into slot B, I don't want to further that because people mess up their amps. It's like all the Fromel kits out there. Turn your Blues Junior into a 60s fire-breathing twin. No, just going to mess up all your pads and traces and mess things up. So in stock form, the AC15C1 is a really good amp. And in the videos, I say, hey, it's got 470 ohm screen grids. Maybe when the warranty expires, you could have a tech put in some 1Ks, but the 470 ohms are fine. I talk about on some of the models which don't have a cut circuit, how to emulate the cut circuit or modify the already existing emulation of a cut circuit. And I talked earlier about how you can change out the 500K master volume pot for 1 meg. So I mentioned a lot of the things that I do. There's some things I do that are above and beyond that, but they're not so much trade secrets as I don't want that information getting in the wrong hands. I've got friends who are techs, and if they ask me, hey, what did you do on that? I'll tell them. Brad knows what I'm doing in these things. And, you know, Chris Church up in Canada, I've given my secret sauce to, Church Audio, because even before the most recent insanity, it's very expensive and difficult to ship amps from Canada to US and back. It doesn't make sense for anyone. So if anyone wants my mods in Canada, Chris Church at Church Audio, and a couple other techs at different extremes of Canada, I've given that information to. And so if a tech reaches out to me, I'll be glad to share them. I don't want to put it in a YouTube video and then have people try to do it on their kitchen table. I don't mean to be mean about it. Thank you, David. I appreciate you. David Allen Herrick. Let's see. Talking about the weather. Let's see. Any suggestions for a good tech in the Raleigh-Durham area? I don't, but if you were to contact Mojotone, they're not too far from there. They're gonna know who's good in the Raleigh-Durham area. They're gonna know all the techs in North Carolina, especially. Ask the guys over at Mojotone who they recommend in Raleigh-Durham, because just call them and ask to speak to their amp department. Many try to use more distortion saturation than is required. Yeah, well, I mean, I think this is a lot of distortion that I currently have dialed up. You know, for reference, gain at just over noon, almost to 1 o'clock. Treble at 11 o'clock. Mids at almost 2 o'clock. Bass at almost 11 o'clock. Presence at about a little over 2 o'clock. And the master volume here is at 10 o'clock. And the bright switch is on, which affects this. And this guy's got an AY7 and an AT7 and then an AX7, not 3 AX7s, because Trainwreck has more drive than you'll ever need, more gain than you'll ever need. This with the volume on 2 on the guitar. Suddenly, I'm in 4th grade playing Stratego at a friend's house, and he would put on the same damn Wings album over and over and over again. Mater. Never knew what the hell that song was about, but that brings that to mind. Let's see. Turn the Okay, thanks. I'm unfamiliar with the 10-inch version of that. I've not tried the Alnico version. I've only tried the 12-inch SC64, which I really like. I'm not sure that I would want that to be the only speaker in my arsenal, but I think if I were a deluxe reverb player who had a telly, I'd probably want at least a 1x12 with that speaker to use it at certain times, because it is a certain mid-range response that I really like, but there are other things that that speaker doesn't do to my ears. But that, again, I'm talking about the 12. I haven't tried the 10. In time, I will. Hey, New York Geology. No experience with the SL5. I remember the Class 5. I don't think I know the SL5. Sorry. Brad may have some ideas about that. Princeton mod, yay or nay thoughts? Stokes mod, Paul C mod, that's a PI thing. Princeton non-verb to LT long tail. Don't. I wouldn't change it to the long tail pair because you give up too much about what makes Princeton a good amp. There are other amps that do other things. Stokes mod, I do a similar thing to the Stokes mod. I just came upon it independently. And I think my implementation is better than the Stokes version, and I've spoken to Stokes about it. I'm not a big fan of the Paul C mod. I understand why he's doing it, and I've tried it out of curiosity. I prefer the Stokes Me mod, which is giving the PI higher headroom. But if you look at the Princetons I've got on the channel where I've done these things, most of it's just giving the phase inverter some higher headroom, but giving it by higher voltage, decreasing or eliminating blocking distortion on the cathode follower side of the PI, putting some grid limiting at that stage as well, which is straight out of what you're going to find here, valvewizard.co.uk. That I always forget which side to go from. Right there. Look at his cathodine phase inverter chapter, and then I changed the either a change or put a resistor in parallel. So 1 meg resistor in series for the cap that goes to the intensity pot. Change that to 330 to 470K, or just put another 1 meg across it if you want. Get a deeper reverb tremolo effect, and I will often either change or add another 10 nanofarad in series, so that instead of 20-10-10 in the LFO, it's 20-20-10, and you have a slower minimum tremolo speed, which is really nice with the increased tremolo depth. Synergy can give you both AC30 and high gain, kind of, sorta, but it's also a very different thing than a traditional amp. And you're gonna be getting the AC30 preamp kind of thing, but a lot of the true AC30 sound is the power amp. Now, not everyone will be able to tell the difference. I'm not saying anything's wrong with the Synergy module, but that's just part of the puzzle. That's part of the recipe. It's an important part. But it is the top of the hour. I need to go to the special room in the back. I will be back in a few. I'll see you guys in 7 minutes. So if anyone needs to run and get a sandwich or anything, now is your time. Coming back a little bit early. Telly, Trainwreck. Go. Forgot how it went. Shit. Have to bust out some physical graffiti later too. The guitar and amp are up for it. If I don't remember how it goes. Dang nabbit. Anyway, that's a single coil. You know, the amp's insane. Let me put it back in standby. I thought I had that. I thought I had that in my muscle memory, but it was just gone. I've been considering buying a new amp this year. We'll check out Friedman. Always good to check out Friedman. He has some really nice stuff. Not all the stuff works for everyone. That's why he's got different models. Todd Richmond's enjoying his Soldano Astro 20. Cool. Papa Hoigs 313 is enjoying the Runt 50. That sounds like a cool setup. Yeah. Screw you, Wes. But at least I can pronounce it. If you with the random numbers, maybe that'd just be the only differentiation. Let's see. Thanks, Element 80. Appreciate you. Building a JTM 45, thinking of adding a switch split cathode. From what I remember, I'm not a fan. Any reason? I think an option for, well, you can. I would temp it in. Don't drill for a switch until you try it. You may love it. You may say, well, it's a slight difference, not a huge difference. Or you may say, I always like the split, and I'm just going to wire it with a split, because you can always build it with a split. But I would not drill for a switch until you're sure that you would actually need a switch and use a switch, because there's less to think about. If you have a switch, if you can change the sound, you may always be wondering, should I change that? And because then you start to doubt yourself and second guess yourself. The fewer switches you have, the more likely you are to just play. Maybe that makes me sound like a fuddy-duddy, but I think there's some value to that. There's nothing wrong with a split cathode. I wouldn't add a mega bright cap on the treble channel like they did in the Super Lead, but you can do a split cathode if you want. There's no magic to shared. There's no magic to split. There are different options. Matchless Spitfire playing rock. ET65 is one of many good ones, but it depends, Mags 390, it's real subjective, and I don't know what your rock is. Is your rock Chuck Berry? Is your rock Metallica? 65, yeah, for the Chuck Berry, not so much from the Metallica. By the way, today I've got the Royer on the Veteran 30, not on the ET65, so... Thank you, Alan. Appreciate that. That'll go towards the coffee fund. what will be my one amp to rule them all, from high gain to cleans to edge of breakup, etc. So far, you think it's a Marshall JVM, one can do it all. It's a bit noisy, that's true. I would not be a JVM. That's an amp that promises a lot and delivers a whole lot of okay, but it doesn't excel at any one thing. The closest thing to that I've ever tried is the I think it's called the PT100 now. It used to be called the Custom Audio Electronics something or other. That's a really good option that truly does a lot of channels really well, but it's kind of more in the Steve Lukather needs 3 channels for the studio kind of thing. These are the 3 channels that Steve Lukather or Pete Thorne would use in the studio. It's a Fendery clean, it's a Marshall-y crunch, and then it's a higher gain Marshall-y sound. And they're cool, but they're not everyone's perfect amp. I don't know that there is a single amp that does everything that everyone would like. I'm a big believer in, hey, this is my clean amp, and this is my medium dirty amp, this is my dirty amp. And I think you can accomplish that for the same price, if more real estate on stage, than one amp that does everything. Especially if you don't need to have extraordinarily high stage volume. So, like I said before, whether that's a Princeton for cleans and a AC15 for dirt, or an AC15 for clean and a Jakey Lee 20-watt Friedman for everything else, you're going to get better sounds if you have an amp which is dedicated for one range of the spectrum that you need. But if you're in a top 40 band and you have a small stage area, there's nothing wrong with saying I'm going to use a fractal, or I'm going to use a Boss Katana, even depending on the gig and what your needs. I personally would look at like a Blues Cube over a Marshall JVM. Oh, it's an old channel of an old AC30 bottom kitchen. Clean the pot, and if it continues to mess up, change that pot out. It can be it can be a bit of a hassle to change out the pot in an old AC30 because of the way the bus wires run and where the normal volume pot is in the sequence. But if your pot needs to be changed out, your pot needs to be changed out, and you can, if you're okay with it, because it can always be fixed later, just snip the old negative lug, leaving it connected to the bus wire. Remove that pot, put in a new pot, and just do a little wire from the bus wire to the ground lug of the new volume pot, so you don't have to take everything out if you need to just change the one pot. Pots do wear out. They're rated for X thousand number of rotations, and they get to X 1007, and there they are. They fail. I have a box of 813 tubes on what to build a guitar amp. Any suggestions? Well, the good news is you won't need all 813 of them, but beyond that, I can't answer that question. I don't know what tubes you have, or if you are at the stage of your development where you should be considering buying a guitar amp, building a guitar amp. Most people should buy their amps, not build their amps. I see a lot of false confidence among kit builders and people who think, well, I can turn this into a guitar amp. It also amazes me how much bad people are willing to live with or think is normal. I'll have amps come in that have never worked right, like this freaking train wreck where the grids were reversed, where it's unstable and oscillated. That was not built last year. This work was not done a week ago. People have been living with that, thinking that's just how this amp was. No. Now, the current owner, Brett, knew something was not right with that amp. So he brought it to me after he got it. He just bought it, figured out something wasn't right, brought it to me. But how many years had that amp been not right? And people thought, well, this thing's just kind of finicky. Planning a project to convert a Zenith record player, 12X7 and 6J5, single triode in the preamp, into a Champ-like project with a treble master bass stack, 1,000 using the 6J5 versus replacing the 12A whatever 7. I don't see the point of converting a record player to a tube amp when you can buy a Champ kit or any kind of kit for not much money, and you are going to have a guaranteed better experience and result without cramming things into things that never fit. I mean, I've brought Filmo sound projectors for so long, and I started turning them away because, yeah, I could build a guitar amp out of it. Sure, it's going to cost a lot more than if you just give me an empty box to start with. Without knowing specific layout, I cannot tell you whether it's a good idea or not, but I think it's probably not the best way to achieve a guitar amp. And if you're going to have a treble middle bass tone stack on a Champ, expect it to have a very clean low output unless you add another gain stage somehow. ET65 is not a bright speaker. ET65 is a very balanced speaker. But again, I don't know what genre you mean by rock, so if you could put that down there, Mags, I will see it and I'll try to give you an updated recommendation. Thanks, Flash84. Did you hear me say I'm not a big fan of distortion pedals early? Why is that? To me, they sound cheaper, but for some styles, that's the point. Yeah, I mean, they can have their role, and not that long ago in one of the clean Fender videos, I kicked on a few overdrive pedals and said pedals are fun, and pedals are fun, but I've never heard a pedal that does what this Telly straight into this not exceptional copy of a Trainwreck does. Same thing for the 335, straight in, Strat, straight in, no pedals used, no pedals necessary. And if I were recording, like it's for keeps, I'd much rather have this or a Marshall than to have a pedal into a cleaner amp. Now, I love David Gilmour. There's nothing wrong with a Big Muff into a high watt. It is a different thing. There's nothing wrong with going for a Nirvana kind of thing with a kind of janky sound. But in terms of the response, there's a connection. The fewer things happening and still getting the response and sound you need, to me, the better. This Telly straight into this amp, imagine there's a better player sitting here. That is a much more immediate thing than if you're going through a little 9-volt transistor setup. The fewer things you're going through, the more pure the circuit is, the better. And that sounds like I'm just being arbitrary. That's something I've arrived at after a long number of years experimenting with what if we did this, what if we did that, what if we did this. And I've come to realize that as few things as you have to do to achieve a sound, the better. Now, for some people, that may be Boss Blues Driver into a Princeton, old Telly, and just don't think about it. And that's great, because that's its own version of a simple thing. But as far as the actual circuit goes, there's something beautiful about just the right circuit for the sound without trying to make it do anything else. This thing doesn't have much of a clean sound. This amp doesn't really have a clean sound until you roll your volume off on the guitar. Oops, wrong button. Let's see. Hey, Hama he 2MN. I am planning to use the Mesa 5050 as a stereo amp to drive only the bass section. Which changes would I recommend doing so it would be quiet enough and better EQ for full range? I'm not sure what you're saying. The bass section. I'm really not sure what your question is, Hama. I'm not trying to belittle you. I don't. It is already a full range, big, clean stereo power amp. It's not loud enough to use for a electric bass in most gigging situations. So I don't know what the bass section of what. I would not think that the amp would need to be modded for anything. I don't think I'd recommend the Mesa 5050 as a power amp for things, but if you had one, I would not suggest modding it. It does what it does until it catches on fire because the traces are too close together. Surly Montanan. Depends on the tube tester. Not all tube testers are worth anything. A lot of tube testers will pass an awful lot of bad tubes because they're not testing at any real plate voltages. And I certainly wouldn't buy $1,000 worth of TV and radio tubes because most of them are going to have absolutely no use. But you know, maybe someone out there in the ham radio or hi-fi world does have use for them. But from my part of this world, that'd be a waste of $1,000, or very likely a waste of $1,000. Hey, Fire Assault, I'm about to build a 5v3 kit as a head. On my normal point-to-point pedals, I bend the leads of components and wires at 45 and 90 degree angles for a tidy look. Do you think it'll lead to problems? You don't want to do a harsh bend, just because it could introduce a point of weakness. Even when I do it, I will often do it with just the what do you call it? When the spacing works out, I like to use this. And by its nature, it does not give me exact 90 degree or 45 degree angles. It gives me a slight round over at the transition point. If I'm doing a larger loop, I will use a small screwdriver shaft to give myself the right curve, like if I'm doing a resistor going to a bias pot. I don't want a hard angle because right at the point where it's bent really severely, it can stress a lead. Not always, but to me it's just a best practice not to cause any potential nicks or undue mechanical stress in something. Hey, old guy, would I consider making a video to show what different values caps and guitars will affect the tone, or would tone differences be subtle? Well, the tone differences would be slightly subtle from, say, 15 nanofarad to 20 nanofarad. This tonal difference between 100 nanofarad and 10 nanofarad would be huge. The tonal difference between 100 nanofarad and 22 nanofarad would be pretty large when the tone's rolled all the way off. But it varies to the pickup. And it's already been done very well by David Collins at A2 Guitars. So David, I'm going to put it in the chat right now. I don't have a link to it. David, come on. There he goes. Put that into your YouTube search later, and it's also going to be A2 Guitars. He has an entire great series on cap values, testing different materials, showing you how it's not only just showing you on a scope, but also and a graph, but also letting you hear how all that stuff does. He goes through the whole thing. He's great about it. So I don't need to make that video, A, because David already did it really, really well. B, people would argue with me because they read that the paper and oil is blah, 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 blah. Science can only do so much against received wisdom on forums. Let's see. let's see. Brad's walking in the bush and still has reception, which would sound very different if we didn't remember that he was in Australia. Just walked into a spider web so thick it broke the branch it was attached to. So you guys did this an hour ago. I'm just catching up to it now. Okay, hey Jeff, do I like any of the amp cab switchers? I've not played around with too many of them because most of my local clients aren't doing that. And it is a very tricky thing to do right because you must maintain a load at all times or you can have very bad things happen. So I could find out, probably just from calling Dave Friedman, who he's recommending to his, or I could get in touch with some various people I know in the industry who build a lot of racks and stuff. People who are doing the big high-end racks for tours, Mason at Vertex, for instance. They're going to know what's working, what's not. I think RJM Electronics is doing some stuff like that. But I've not bought any or put together any rigs for people using them. But it's something that I'd be very afraid of people saving the wrong pennies and getting one that did not maintain a load at all times. But I'd be glad to consult with you on that afterwards, Jeff. Hey, Cherry Forever. Got a Marshall JVM410H. You had one. Noisy as hell. Yeah. I'd like to get that sound back, but in a more reliable, less noisy rig. Which Friedman is this? I'm not sure. The 410H has 3 channels. I'm not sure that any of the Friedmans have 3 channels, but in terms of the high gain sounds that amp did, I imagine the Jakey Lee would make you pretty happy. If not, maybe the Jerry Cantrell one he's got. But contact Friedman and ask him. He'll have played the JVM 410H. He knows what that amp does, and he knows which of his models do that. Ask Tim Pierce what amp switchers he used. Yeah, Tim's got all that stuff, but I don't know if how much of that stuff that Tim's doing is off the rack versus he might have contacted some guy who was a tech at one of the studios he used to work at and said, hey, make me one of those switchers we used to have at Sunset Sound or whatever. So he may have stuff that we can't just go to a store and buy. I don't know. Because a lot of stuff when it comes to switchers and stuff like that were custom builds. Big studios used to have their own tech departments who would make things. Have I ever worked on a B-52 AT100? If so, what do I think of them? I have not worked on one. I had one come in, and I opened it up, and I found that the reason that it had failed was that the traces on the output tube sockets were very close to each other, way too close to each other, and it had arced and burned horribly. And I told the owner, I'm sorry, it would cost more than this amp is worth for me to repair your amp. And unless by repairing your amp, I meant I replaced all the output section with new components mounted onto terminal strips with new chassis mounted tube sockets. The other 3 output tubes are likely to do the same thing again. And so I said, it's not worth fixing, because if you'd spend $150, $200 getting me to fix your amp, and then it could happen again 3 weeks later on one of the other sockets. The design was bad. Some things are not worth what they charge, even when they're a bargain. It's the buy once, cry once kind of thing. I would avoid any of the B-52 amps because it's garbage. They're garbage. There's certain things that are offering us free lunches. That's a free lunch. Sorry. Beyond that, they're really poorly built. Not copies of not very good sounding Marshall copies. What size hardware do I use when replacing a preamp tube socket? Original is riveted. drill bit size, screen size. Hey, Sam. If you're replacing a riveted tube socket like in a Marshall, pardon me, Marshall, just one second. The first thing you do is take the tube out. And I've got this titanium 1/16 bit, fits into a real socket so it can't spin around and spin free. And in a rivet or if I need to make a fresh hole into the chassis, I'll use a hole punch to put a little indentation there. Once I've got a place where I know that there's an indentation either in the chassis or the rivet, typically in this case I'd work from the back side of the rivet because there's usually a little concave surface there. I put that, drill through that with a very small hole, and then I'll work my way up from 1/8 to and you know, if you're in the EU, there's going to be metric equivalents to this. In this case, so I work my way up from 1/16 to 5/64, then 3/32, then 7/64, then 1/8. And usually with 1/8, that's the point where it's going to come out. If not, then 9/64. But usually the 1/8 bit gets the old rivet out, even if it was a metric like an M3 or M3 or M4 bit rivet, whatever it was. And at that point, I usually have a pretty clean hole because I've removed the center of the rivet, and so what's left is very thin and it comes out, falls out very easily. I just do that on both sides. At that point, I usually have a clean hole in the chassis. If I were to install a preamp tube socket in a new chassis, I would drill to 1/8 and use a 440 screw, unless I was replacing an existing one that, you know, like an old Fender, and for whatever reason the sheet metal screw had worn out. I drill out to 9/64 and use a 6x32 screw, machine screw. In metric, I think that'd be M3. I'm not sure. I always forget the metric equivalents, but that's the way I would do it. So, no, when we say screen size, I don't know what you mean by screen size. I use a gift card to Fleming's for a Tomahawk Tuesday. First ribeye I've had in 5 years. Well, man, I love a good tomahawk ribeye, but it's really hard to find someone who knows how to cook one so that it's medium rare all the way through without being raw up against the bone, or being medium rare at the bone and then overcooked everywhere else. A tomahawk ribeye is a real good test of the cook. And I'm going to try to, I only got 20 minutes. I'm going to try to speed through some of the remaining questions. So I got sidetracked talking about ribeyes and stuff, but you pull my chain, I clap like the monkey. I'd like to try EL34 and AB165, which already has adjustable bias. Just configure the socket for EL34. You won't get any benefit from using EL34 and AB165. You're not going to hear much of a difference. There's no benefit to it. There's no reason to. You'd be changing a bunch of stuff to end up saying, hey, that sounds pretty much the same. It's just not. There are things that change in the amps that to the player, those are the visible changes. Hey, that one's got 6L6s and it sounds like X. That one's got 34s and it sounds like Y. And from the outside of the box, the only thing you see is the tubes. You're not going to hear much of a difference. And I've had amps like the Shiva where you could use either. There's not a huge difference. There's not a huge difference. There's a subtle difference, but it's not worth modifying an AB165 to get a subtle difference. Turn your mid spot up. There you go. Turn your mid spot up, slightly decrease the amount of negative feedback. You'll be happier. And Jeff, in case you didn't see it, Wes has got a KHE 4x4 amp switcher, and Wes does his research. Yeah, I bet that'd be a good choice. And I'm sure the Fryette one is good too, but I don't have any experience with either one. Hey, 1217, working on a newer Supro Galaxy, I'm sorry, with several burned resistors, of course they are. Any advice on getting the damn board out of a new Supro? I need to access the bottom and the chassis is too small to get it out. We've all been there. You just got to disconnect wires and jiggle harnesses and get rid of zip ties until you can get it out. Either that or use a crowbar and just say, oh, it broke, sorry. But man, you shouldn't need to fix a new Supro, and yet most new Supros need so much fixing. Yeah, I've got some Supro videos up on the channel where I fight that same kind of stuff, and some other amps. I don't remember the most recent one, but it's a pain in the butt. But there's no magic silver bullet. Yep, the Silver Jubilee has got some of the best cleans of any Marshall, and it's a bizarre circuit that doesn't have any business sounding as good as it does. But I don't find that the tone stack in the Silver Jubilee works as well for the overdrive as it does for the cleans. Hey, Robert, in your Express 550, the 12X7s are much more likely to be severely microphonic than the 6L6s. 6L6s can be microphonic, but if you're hearing it as you play, it's more likely to be the preamp tube sockets. Hey, Progress Pedals, what question? 67 Bandmaster choke lets out the magic smoke on stage, one 6L6 shorted, one balance resistor in the cap open. All right. Grid stoppers and screen resistors pre-crumbly. Well, that tube either died a horrible death or something in the tube socket area or tube socket wiring went really bad and caused a chain reaction, and that tube drew way too much current, which caused the choke to draw too much current and let out its magic smoke, which tells me that you probably have too high a value mains resistor in that amp. It's very common. Hey, amp says 2 amp and there's a 20 amp in there because someone changed that out on the road, and that's what they had at the hardware store, etc. And that's the symptom you get. Imagine if you had that much a shorted 6L6 and resistors on the output tubes sockets going bad like that. You probably need to change out the socket as well. You probably have some carbon buildup in that socket. The good news is none of that is inherently expensive, including a choke. And it'll still be a 67 Bandmaster once that is done. But that is a good indication to me. If the choke went up like that, that amp had the wrong fuse in it, most likely. Wish Dave Freeman would do a take on a high-gain modern metal amp. The Uberstahl sounds great, but looks complicated. Not a huge fan of the aesthetic either. More of a comment than a question. Well, thanks for the super chat. Dave does this too. He's got the amp panel tomorrow with Jace over at Head First. And then he's got his own stuff he does on Tone Talk. You can give him $10 and tell him what to do. I think from his perspective, the J.K. Lee is a modern metal amp because of the stuff that he likes. Dave builds a wide range of different sounding amps, but he builds the amps that he likes, as opposed to trying to please someone else that he's giving a sound he's not actually that interested in. And I respect that, but he's not the only person out there making stuff. The Uberstahl is a very complicated amp. It's a big beast of a box. It does have a certain sound, but I think some of the Friedman stuff, if you bias it a little cooler and tame down the lows and don't use don't chase resonance and drop C stuff, is going to do fine. I would say Dave's amps are not built for drop C. But if you are one of those guys, I think honestly, some of the digital stuff is the better option. Thanks, Martin. Good to see you here. Any old Fender amp I've repaired, I wish I could have kept. A lot of them. You know, I've got a 58 and a 59 Bassman right here, and they're both going to go away very soon. And on one level, that makes me sad. On the other hand, they're very loud, and I haven't turned them on much for my own use, partially because I don't want to get attached to them. It's like puppies, and you know, if you're going to be giving the puppy, if you have a litter of puppies, your dog has a litter of puppies, don't name and get attached to all the puppies too much because they need to go to a different home. Or like an onion, you know, the way to cut an onion without crying is you don't name it first. There's a video up of Logan playing a 58 5v3 Deluxe that I did some tweaks to. That amp I wish I could have kept. That was a particularly good sounding amp after I made some changes to it. Hey, Ruggish. I've heard mixed things, anecdotally heard very mixed things about Amplified Nation. I have no opinion of my own, so I'll offer no opinion beyond that. What 8-inch speaker would I put in your 65 Vibro Champ? Hey, Richard Ross, the original speaker still works, so asking in case it ever quits. Well, the trick is the speakers that will fit in a Vibro Champ, because some of them are too long. I would probably go myself with the WGS 8C or the Weber, or even with some of the MOD 8-inch speakers. There's only so much you can get out of an 8-inch speaker. And some of the better ones to me are the Alnico, which usually don't fit in a Vibro Champ because of the depth of the cab and where the tubes are. But remember, all those 8-inch speakers and previously 6-inch speakers, none of them are any good. None of them are very good speakers. So you get a character sound. So I would not be ashamed just to put a Weber Signature or a $30 MOD 8-inch speaker into that. You're not going to hear a huge difference between a $30 speaker and a $80 speaker when it comes to 8-inch. Hey, them fuzzy monsters. I don't think there's going to be a part 2 on this Cherry Tone train wreck. I might do a little bit of, hey, here are these 5 amps about to go home. Here's a little bit through them. But all I did to that was I shielded it, gave it some new feet. And I said this at the beginning of today's stream. I don't want to do a bunch of stuff to get it even better than it is now because my name's not on it. And a lot of that would be involved work, spending the owner's money. And yes, it would sound better, but it sounds good enough. It sounds as good as most. Now, if he wants something better, he can sell it and have me build him one. And I could get some credited with it as opposed to doing all the work and have somebody else get the credit. So I don't think I'm going to be doing a second video on that. It greatly benefited from me shielding the bottom of the cab. If you want the details on that, that's at the beginning of the stream. Recone the CTS Alnico 10-inch speakers in your Super Reverb are replaced with a set of Recone JBLs. There has never been a better sounding 10-inch speaker, especially in a Super Reverb, than the original CTS Alnico 10s. That is one of the best speakers ever made. It's got a 1 1/4, 1.5 inch voice coil. Most 10-inch speakers have a 1-inch voice coil. That is the sound of a Super Reverb. I would not change out for JBLs. Get your CTS 10-inch speakers reconed. It's about $60, $70 each. Dave Halford, I'm going to put it down here again. Halford Loud Speakers. He's here in Memphis. He's a 10-minute walk from my house. He's a great guy. His name's Dave. He does a fantastic job, and he's reconing 2 of the 4 speakers for that 59 Bassman right now. But the 10-inch speakers on a Super Reverb, the CTS, that's the best 10-inch speaker ever made, especially for a Super Reverb. Get that reconed. JBLs don't sound right for that amp. How do I think this amp compares to a Z-Rec? Well, the Z-Rec is a better built amp, but this has a lot more gain than a Z-Rec. And the Z-Rec, you do have to play the let's find the EF86 that works game. But for my tastes, I think I'd probably be a little bit happier with the Z-Rack. But this is a cool sound. There's no denying that. Could I convert the Marshall SV20 to run fixed bias 6v6s? Worth it? Yes and no. Yes, I could. No, it'd certainly not be worth it. It's not a very good amp. You'd just be polishing the turd till the corn shines. I should not have said that in front of humans. Sorry. It came to me. I'm like, that's funny. And then I'm like, oh, that's gross. Anyway. I have an AC30 hand-wired that you don't really care for. Is it salvageable? In a nutshell, it's harsh. Hey, yeah, they are harsh. You can see all the mods I've got up on the hand-wired series. A lot of it is decreasing the filtering and changing out the ceramic caps because it sounds harsh in stock form. But look at those videos, see if those give you an inspiration. It's a pain in the butt to work on that amp, but it can be made into a very good amp. Hey, G-Man72, got a Synergy 20 IR. You love it. What are my thoughts on it? I have not had any experience. I've not had one in. I have no thoughts on it other than people seem to really like them. And I know some of the guys who are involved with Synergy, and they're very good designers. And I am inclined to believe that it is fantastic, but I have no experience with one. So. Hey, Rockabilly46, thank you very much. Notice I offer what I would like to see in the amp that is different or missing comparing to factory schematic or my vast experiences. Not sure what you're asking. Sometimes I've done that. Sometimes I've shown, hey, I wish I'd done this because of X, Y, and Z. Sometimes I'd make the change and I'll show a schematic. There's certain things like even companies and at periods that they were good, like the AB165. To me, they make a fundamental mistake if they're doing a DC mixer, mixing DC from two different stages, which means that they're undoing the decoupling that the filter caps provide. So one of the changes I make to AB165 is change it so that the DC mixer is mixing things from the same filter node. And that really decreases a lot of the noise and makes it a smoother sound. That's a mistake that they made. I don't know why they made that mistake. I can say that, Fender made great amps, but Fender did not get everything perfect. That's one of the mistakes they made. They made other mistakes in the 50s, which they corrected, which led to the 60s amps. I've had a lot of amps in from 60 through 62 where I have been seeing the almost real-time development of the AB763 tone stack as they would try this, they try that. Wasn't on any schematic to be like, hey, look, this amp has a back sandal. This amp has a primitive version of what became the AB763 schematic. They're figuring stuff out. Not all their, some of their zigs should have been zags. Have I ever discussed QC and reliability of Morgan, Tone King, and Friedman in the past? I have. I rate of the Morgans I've had in have been horrible. The Friedmans are excellent, and the Tone Kings overall are in the middle, but the mistakes in the Tone Kings that I've had in under BAD build have been so bad that I cannot recommend them because they were fundamental errors that caused fire, and they should have been caught in the design process. So while they're all made under the same roof, the Friedman amps are the only of those three that I would recommend. As far as warm, compressed cleans without overly bright highs. So you're looking for a clean amp. Of those, I would suggest getting a deluxe reverb reissue and taking out the bright cap and not turning the treble over 4 and choosing the right speaker. You're going to have a great amp. You can buy a used one for I think under $1,000 still, though the market is crazy these days. Hey, TW1986, RCA long plate black or gray for vintage Fender blackface V2 position, or is it all BS? It's almost all BS by people trying to sell you old tubes for a lot of money. I don't know that you would... If you put in a $300 RCA tube, replacing a the groove tubes that came in it, and you know that you are hearing the $300 tube, you're going to hear all these magical differences. If I squat down behind your amp and make changes, I don't know that even the best players in the world would consistently be able to tell when it was the RCA, when it was a groove tube, when it was a JJ, let alone when it was a gray plate or black plate. People make way too much of it, but once you've spent $300 on a tube, you're damn well going to be proud of the obvious difference you hear there. In my experience, tubes are noisy or they're not, they're microphonic or they're not, they sound good or they don't. Beyond that, it's the actual gain factor. 12X7s nominally have a gain factor of 100. This one might have a gain factor of 83. The JJ over there might have a gain factor of 110. The RCA I've got a bowl full of RCAs on my bench that probably range anywhere from 80 to 100. They're all nominally a gain factor of 100. In some amps, you're going to hear that different gain level a lot. Other amps, you're not going to hear it at all. So, what are my thoughts on orange amps, especially the Rocker 15 or 32? I've come across them. They're pretty good amps. I answered this on almost every stream. I'm trying to wrap this up in the last 5 minutes. For the price, oranges are pretty good. I would not spend over $1,000 for an orange, but the sub $1,000 oranges are pretty good. Hey, Cast Music Journey, appreciate that. To me, that oscillator circuit resistors and cap circuits is pure magic. How? Why? I don't understand that process yet, but when I will it still be magic? Well, I don't know if it'll still be magic, but it'll still be interesting. The LFO in a tremolo circuit is an interesting thing. As long as the power is on, it's a perpetual motion machine. Well, if by perpetual, we mean about 30 to 40 years until a cap wears out. Thank you very much, Cat's Music Journey. Let's see. I think we're not going to be able to get to all the questions. Let me make sure I don't miss any super chats. Is a B100 not a high gain amp? It's a very high gain amp, but it is a high gain saturated kind of amp. More saturated than the Trainwreck I played earlier, though it can do kind of stuff like this. But when I'm hearing people talk about modern metal, I'm expecting very crisp percussive attack, the ability to handle drop C stuff, detuned guitars, 7-string guitars even. And I think the BE100 is kind of more of a Marshall on steroids as opposed to a tube version of that does a mastered record sound in real time, which is what a lot of metal guys really want. They want to sound like the record in the room. And it's a very difficult thing because if you were actually in the room when a lot of those records were made, they did not sound like that until they got out of the until Bob Clearmountain, etc. were done with them. That's a really hard thing to get out of an amp because the power section of a tube amp is not doing what the same sound when run through an L1 maximizer or a whole bunch of limiters does to it. Especially when you vary the attack, it's really hard to make a actual tube power section behave the way a recorded amp does. Max power is, have I worked on a stiletto? Yeah, there's a ground wire running under an axial cap from a valve mounting pin. I'm not sure what you're describing. I apologize. I'm not sure what you're describing. I don't remember what I saw in the stiletto other than Mesa garbage with like solder joints for diodes right up against plastic standoffs. Now I want a goddamn ribeye. I might have to make that happen. I don't think I'm going to be able to get through any more questions now. We're down to the last 2 minutes. And I need to tell everyone, thank you for being here. So thank you for being here. I really appreciate that people were this interested. I had 1,315 views during this, 192 concurrent at a time. That's pretty amazing for what I think of as a small niche channel niche channel. I'm amazed that we just hit 75,000 subscribers. I used to do thank you videos when we hit 1K, 2K, 5K, 9K, 10K. And I stopped doing it because it began to feel like if I did hey, thanks for reaching blah, 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 that was self-congratulations. Hey, thanks for making me look great. But I also want to take time occasionally to acknowledge to everyone that, thank you for making me feel great. It means a lot to me. I don't take it lightly. And I don't take it as, of course I'm at 75,000 subscribers, blah, 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 I deserve nothing less. First of all, thank you. I've been extremely fortunate. Second of all, I see the big channels. I know that I am a largish fish in a very small pond as far as the big channels go. I will not be buying my Porsche from my YouTube proceeds anytime soon, which is good. I don't think I'd fit in the damn thing. Yeah, the cold pizza celebration was at 9K, Brad. No, that was at 2K. In fact, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to go celebrate with finish a slice of cold pizza I had a few bites of before I started today's stream. I got back from our walk and I had to get set up for this. So I only had time to have like 3 bites of the pizza, then brush my teeth so I didn't have pepperoni flecking at you at the camera. Anyway, that's enough about that. Anyway. Thank you very much for getting us to 75,000. Thank you for coming here most Saturdays. To everyone whose questions I did not get to, it's really hard to get to the questions asked at the third hour. If the earlier you're here, the better the chances of me answering your question. I would answer all of them if I could. We'll just have to do this again. See you next time.